Joining us now to talk about this, among other issues at this RNC, is Congressman Mike Turner, who chairs the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and Radio. It's great to see you here in Milwaukee, of all places. I hope the convention's going well for you, because we're talking about a lot of serious issues around this, including this matter. And I'd like to get your thoughts on Kimberly Cheatle and the questions that you have for the agency. But as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, what can you tell us about this threat from Iran?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right about the convention. The energy level is extraordinary. The convention is going very well. The people that are here are just so moved by Donald Trump's life having been saved, and really the message that he's got coming out of this convention of reversing the Biden administration's policies on the border, national security, and, of course, the economic. With respect to the director for the Secret Service, obviously, I have, other members of Congress have, the Speaker has called for her resignation. I think at this point it's important for President Biden to stand up. She needs fired. I mean, it's clear the agency is not working. It's inexcusable and outrageous, the failures that occurred. It could have resulted in the death of Donald Trump. They clearly were not adequately protecting him that day. You had Senator Langford here who said they knew there was a threat before they let him on the stage. And as we all know, because we witnessed it, they didn't take out the threat. They didn't shoot the shooter until he had already shot Donald Trump, which could have been a fatal shot. And with respect to this Iran threat, this has been publicly known that Iran was targeting former President Donald Trump and members of his cabinet in retaliation for the killing of Soleimani. Yesterday, when we received our briefing, I asked Director Wray, this has been a known, continuous, and existing threat. The new information that we have doesn't really give us any greater heightened threat. It's just an acknowledgement of the fact that the threat is continuing, and shouldn't have the security that was around Donald Trump already have baked in that level of threat. And he acknowledged, he said, yes, absolutely. And he himself, you could tell in his tone, he's surprised that the Secret Service was not responding, recognizing that there was a state actor threat, in addition to just the general threats that were out there to a presidential candidate.
Well, we've also heard from Director Wray this notion that we could see an increased risk of terror, whether lone wolf or otherwise, something that at the time he said it and since I think we've all found quite concerning. Is there a sense that what we saw take place in Pennsylvania on Saturday is something we could continually see as we move forward through this election cycle? Just how heightened is the security risk for even everyday Americans right now?
Sure, absolutely. You made an excellent point. As we know, Director Wray has gone around openly saying that the lights are flashing red, that we're the highest level of a threat for a potential terrorist attack since 9/11. And he specifically cites the border, that there have been people have been able to cross the border as a result of the Biden administration's policies that have affiliations with terrorist groups and organizations and intend to do Americans harm. That, as you just said, should also be factored into the protection that happens at these rallies, because it's not just the president, it's also the people attending. So that it is an increased threat. And it is one, I think, that also goes to the condemnation of the Biden policies for the border, that individuals have been allowed to come into the country that could perpetrate a terrorist attack.
As you arrive at the Capitol to work every day, security is a factor. With these recent developments, do members of Congress, once and for all, need to be provided a security detail?
Well, I don't know. I mean, several members do have security
based
details.
on threat level, but shouldn't that be across the board at this point, Mr. Chairman?
I think that we're okay right now, and that when we're in secure places, there is security provided. I think the Capitol is secure, and I think that way we know that there's sufficient protection.
Well, the Capitol certainly, I would imagine, is going to have even increased security next week, because you're expecting a visit from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. I feel like that has gotten lost in the shuffle of the developments of recent weeks as it comes to the presidential race. But it's a high-profile visit at a time where there is still a hot war raging in the Middle East. What does the latest intelligence suggest about the trajectory with which that war is moving, as we keep hearing what feel like head fakes about progress towards some kind of ceasefire agreement? Based off what you've heard, what are you expecting Netanyahu will say to you and your colleagues next week?
Well, I think he'll certainly assert the need for Israel to defend itself and the right for Israel to exist, and remind us of the horrendous terrorist attacks and the killing of innocent people and the taking of hostages that occurred, on October 7th, and that even before that, Israel was living under a constant barrage of missile attacks that the Iron Dome would respond to, but nevertheless still resulted in loss of life and property in Israel as a result of these thousands of missiles that were being sent. Part of their entering into Gaza and trying to dismantle Hamas is, of course, dismantling that missile system, their capabilities to launch into Israel. I think his message is going to be very important because he's also going to be hearing the messages back of both support, but that this needs to be resolved. I know Director Burns of the CIA has been doing shuttle diplomacy, attempting to get a deal with Hamas where we could have a period of ceasefire where the hostages could be released. Director Burns has been doing an excellent job in those negotiations.
Will Israel go to war with Hezbollah?
Clearly, again, Israel needs to be able to defend themselves, and there are again thousands of missiles that are in southern Lebanon
to keep Israel.
Right, and so there's that balance of, how do you make certain that your adversary's capabilities can't be used to kill your population?
Mm-hmm. So that's one live war that's happening in the world. There's another happening on the European continent, and the vice presidential nominee, who we all heard speak last night, is a bit skeptical of the U.S. continuing to provide funding for Ukraine. Does the selection of J.D. Vance concern you when you think about the future trajectory of what Russia could do if victorious in Ukraine? Is there something that Senator Vance is missing here?
Well, if you listen to Donald Trump's campaign, and certainly the Trump family, why they say that J.D. Vance was picked because of his compelling story, which is an American story of success, and I think their attractiveness to that is really resounding, I think, with American people. I haven't seen many vice presidents that have a significant impact on foreign policy. And Donald Trump has been very clear that his effort is not to abandon Ukraine, but to end this war. And I think that's what we all want.
We've been talking a lot about Joe Biden and his not only health now as he's come down with COVID, but his mental acuity. You see all the reports that we see. It looks like he's lost the Hill, the Democratic leadership on the Hill. Is there a security component to this? As the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, do you worry about his state of mind and whether that presents a security problem for the United States? I'm sure I'll get lots of tweets about this, but is that a real question?
Absolutely, and this is what I've described it as, is that we really have this vacuum in the administration of decision-making, indecisiveness that has occurred. There are 5 to 10 major policy issues that are gumped up in the Oval Office for which we can't get decisions. Now, I think his national security team, which is a very good national security team, has sort of dissolved into a NATO-style committee where if they all agree, we get great policies. But if they don't agree, then action shuts down because we have indecisiveness coming from the commander-in-chief. And I think that's our greatest threat. If they walk into the Oval Office today and tell him, Mr. President, we have a crisis and we need you to make a decision, I'm not confident he can.
Are you confident that Kamala Harris could?
Well, I would be not confident as to the decision she makes. If she does if she is presented with a decision to make and makes one, I think her policies would be much more dangerous than what we're seeing even out of this administration on foreign policy.
Yeah, I don't want to bring it too far down the road on hypotheticals, but if he actually leaves the race here, does that change the calculus for Republicans in this election cycle for Donald Trump or down ballot races?
Well, I don't think that, the Democratic Party is for an open border. They're for this out-of-control spending that has resulted in this high inflation. So it's 6 and they've embraced the abrupt withdrawal from Afghanistan that was resulted in, just total destabilization in the area, and have supported the Biden administration's restrictions that have been placed on President Zelensky in Ukraine that have resulted in this stasis, this stalemate, this unbelievable, loss of life that's continuing to occur on Ukraine instead of allowing them to win. So I don't think, regardless of who they pick, that you're going to see a big policy shift, and that's what it would take, I think, for the American public. The American public want that border closed. They know, as Director Wray has said, they're less safe today because of what the Biden administration and the Democratic Party has done with the border.
Well, we heard about the border from Senator Vance in his acceptance speech last night, in part talking about the fentanyl that is crossing over. And he also drew a line not just to the border issue, but to the issue of China, something he spoke about quite passionately on multiple occasions during the speech. Let's just remind ourselves of a bit of what the vice presidential nominee had to say.
Now, thanks to these policies that Biden and other out-of-touch politicians in Washington gave us, our country was flooded with cheap Chinese goods, with cheap foreign labor, and in the decades to come, deadly Chinese fentanyl. Joe Biden screwed up, and my community paid the price.
Of course, Sir, Senator Vance, Donald Trump have spoken out in favor of putting higher tariffs on goods coming from China. There's been a lot of conversation as to whether or not we're going down a road that could ultimately lead to a decoupling of our economies. How does the economics factor into the actual relationship and change the theater when we're thinking about the Pacific? If we're starting to cut China off more economically, does that actually make the world more dangerous because they may be less likely to cooperate with us?
Well, I think what you're seeing is, I mean, we already have a global, trade economy that I think has brought greater prosperity around the globe and even to the United States. But we see that we have gone too far. The vulnerabilities that were evident during COVID in our supply chain and our manufacturing, where we weren't making the things here that we need in order to be able to survive. And then the second is we have a great workforce that is underutilized, and it's underutilized because we've allowed jobs to leave that ought to be in the United States. And Senator Vance is actually saying words that in Ohio are incredibly important. We've seen so many manufacturing jobs that have left that need to be brought back to the United States, and that's going to be an issue, and certainly is a topic for this administration. You're
going to be in the hall tonight for Donald Trump's speech, I suspect?
Yes.
We just got the speakers lineup here. Dana White, Hulk Hogan, what's the message?
I think this, on that unity message, this really is the all-American team, right?
Wrestling
everybody's coming together, and I think they're coming together because they recognize that the Biden policy has been destructive to the United States, and the policies that Trump pursued in his first term that he's going to pursue in his second term will right that.
Is there anything you haven't heard from the speakers thus far, J.D. Vance or otherwise, that Donald Trump needs to address before this convention is over this evening?
You mean
in terms of policy? Obviously, we had foreign policy night last night. We've had an economic policy night as well. But the American people are voting on a number of different issues, knowing that, for example, on the Republican platform that was officially adopted, there was no federal abortion ban. Are we speaking to all of America when we're talking about unity here, or is there more that could be done to reach out to groups of voters that may not be all in on Donald Trump as the delegates assembled here are?
Well, I think what's also important in this is it's not just a document that's the platform for the Republican Party. It's that Donald Trump has a record. I mean, one of the things that you're going to hear tonight is that he's going to say not just this is what I think we ought to do to make America stronger again, to bring the economy back, to close the border and make certain that we're a safe country. He's going to be able to say, I was doing it. When Biden came in, it's not just that Biden won the election; it's that Biden reversed the policies, and now we have the detriment conditions as a result of what Biden did.
All right, Chairman, it was great to have you here in Milwaukee. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. That is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. We appreciate it.